Welcome to Wednesday Q&A, where you all ask the questions and we answer. Woo! I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, physical therapist extraordinaire, amazing human, Kristen Williams.
Hey, Laura. Hey, everybody.
Hey, hey.
All right, let's hit the ground running here. We have a question that came in through support that says, it is from Christine Lavalli. I was gifted a set of Yoga Buddy wrist blocks. I do have some discomfort in my wrists occasionally in crow or handstand, but I'm unsure if these are a good or safe solution. Do you recommend? Or what do you suggest to strengthen wrists and take some of the pressure off during hand balance poses? Many thanks. Love the Q&A. So this is not an uncommon question. I am not familiar with the Yoga Buddy wrist blocks. Are you?
I have a feeling they're ones that enable you to kind of hold like you're holding a weight. So it's you're not pushing, you're not in wrist extension, but you just kind of grab it. They have, I think these have kind of it looks actually like a dumbbell. And
okay, I just pulled them up. Let me share.
Yeah,
because they're interesting. They're actually, it can look like this is kind of cool, believe it or not. Not that we're promoting anything, but it if you turn it on its side, yes, it is saying what you're saying, Laura. Keep talking.
So first of all, let's just talk about wrist stuff before you even think about using a modification. For wrist extension, we're not in wrist extension much during the day. We're in a lot of wrist flexion. So that's like grabbing something, typing, etc. We're very rarely in a wrist extended mode. I always say, unless you're like carrying a tray over your head, like I used to do when I was working in a restaurant. But other than that, we really aren't in that range of motion. So when we talk about joint mobility, there's a spectrum within that range of motion. And then, so first you have to have the range of motion, but then you have strength within it. It's kind of like a dial. So we might have a lot of flexion strength. We actually might not. Like grip strength is correlated with longevity. And if you've ever done a grip strength test, sometimes it's really surprising how weak we actually are, even though we're in a flex position. So this adds another layer, which is just because you're in a range of motion often doesn't mean that you're strong in that range of motion. For instance, we might be sitting and our hips are in flexion. They're flexed, but they're not actively flexing. They're not getting strong. So a lot of people actually need more hip flexion strengthening, but they think, oh, I just have to stretch my hips because they feel so tight. So there's where the position of the joint is. Do you have the full range of motion? And then do you have strength within that range of motion? So the issue a lot of times in yoga is really traditional yoga, you come in, you don't do much of a kind of warm up, and then you get right into it. And so a lot of people will talk about having wrist pain because they're getting right into a plank or down dog or something like that, which you need at least neutral. You need to get into that neutral position and beyond for extension, like in plank. And then you layer like getting way over and the load of your body weight in something like crow and handstand, then you're not only in that wrist extension, but you really are loading it. So the answer is whether you use a modified thing like a block. So I'm not against these props as a tool, kind of as a kind of bridge, unless you have something like a ganglion, which is not something you can do much about. But if it's just you're feeling a lot of compression in your wrist, that's just a message that you need to get that range of motion, and you then need to get strength within it. So you just have to, it's like a gradient curve. You get the range of motion, you start loading in a quadruped, rock forward and back, getting more extension with your weight over it. Then you try that in plank. Those are fundamental before you even think about like a crow. Crow is a lot. It's beyond 90 degrees, and then it's your body weight on your arms, so even more down into the wrist. So if you don't have the range of motion, it's going to feel really junky and clunky. And then, of course, if you don't have the strength within that range of motion, it's just going to feel, like you can't hold, like you're going to break. What else would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I mean, I can identify, with you, Christine. I've definitely struggled with wrist issues on occasion. My problem with a block or even a dumbbell or something, I mean, especially for a handstand or a crow, I mean, you're already balancing on your hands. So then going on something that's unstable, that like when think of your hands as your feet. Uh, um, when you're on the ground, when you're on your hands, getting that spread of the fingers and that wider base of support is important. Just like it's harder to walk in stilettos, it's harder to walk on your tippy toes when you have a smaller base of support. So kind of what happens, I think, I did look at those blocks, which I think are pretty cool for people who struggle with wrist pain. Let's say even for a twisted crescent, or something, a side plank, which you have a larger base of support, but for a true arm balance, especially a handstand, that would make me very nervous to be on, because to get your hands in more of like the dumbbell holding position, you're on the long, skinny side to balance. The flatter, more supportive side, that we do play around with handstands on blocks on the flat, low setting. I don't know that it would give you as much relief in a hand balancing position. I think what Laura's saying with, you got to get the range of motion, and without the range of motion, trying these balance poses, it's just so much weight through this small joint. I know whenever mine get irritated, they lose range, because why? Well, you get swelling in the area. And so while it's swollen, while it's irritated, I actually do less. And I do less weighted range of motion, body weight weighted range of motion, but I will get on my hands, like what you said, Laura, quadruped, plank, doing all of the wrist stretches on our YouTube for free. I have a wrist warm up on there. If you go to the Lit Yoga Method YouTube site, I've got stuff on there. I've got some other wrist things. We do a ton of stuff on our website with, wrist focused classes. I even have an entire series, Weightless in the Wrists, that a lot of people will like to use when their wrists are bothered, because that's the thing. Exactly what you said, Laura. You've got to get the range of motion, numero uno. Then you have to get that strength at the end range. And case in point, full weighted positions, i.e. crow, crane especially, forget about that. And even handstand tends to go past that 90-degree range. It's just too much. We would never, well, everybody but Laura, most people would not go out and run a marathon right away without some sort of training. I'm joking. You had some training.
When I was 18.
Yes, you was 18 and could do that stuff. But nowadays, you would never do that. You wouldn't go to the gym and start bench pressing with the big 45-pound dumbbells and the bar. You just wouldn't. And we're kind of doing the same thing to our wrists if they aren't ready for it, by going into those fully body weighted positions. So do I like the blocks you're talking about? I think they're great to use in a just, your single arm weight bearing, or your twisted crescents, your side plank I think that's still stable enough. Anything that you're coming on to one half moon, things like that, because they will allow you to keep your wrist less extended, which in the short term feels better. But you need to get that strength. You need to build up slowly. You need to do the work even before you practice. When mine are bothering me, I'll spend 5 minutes before I even do the reset and do my little wrist thing. And then, of course, I always bring it up to the scapula. We've talked about this in other podcasts. Look and see what's happening up above, because that might be why your wrists are bothering you. If you're not working well in the scapula, if you're not strong there, if you're kind of sinking into the wrist versus using the strength of your core, your scapulae, to get out of those wrists. I think about, especially with crow, when I'm in crow, I think of lifting up, out, like the knees. I almost want to feel like I'm hovering but I'm not, but I'm lifting up with my deep pit of my belly and my psoas to unweight the hands. That's more challenging to do in handstand. But I do think what's interesting about handstand is I find I'm putting more weight through my wrists when my scapula, when I'm not really putting enough weight through my scapula. When I'm in more of that, I don't ever go into, let's say, a banana shape, but I might be in less than full shoulder flexion. So I'm extending my wrist more to get my butt over my shoulders. So that's the other thing is, really look at your shoulder position in a handstand. Why are you putting the weight through the wrist? And what can you do to ameliorate that in the short term? So that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, and I would just add on, this is all making me think, like, the thing about yoga, um, and this could be in any form of exercise movement, is that we get these, you know, drills or poses or the almost like a check off, like, I want to be able to do this. And we have to start thinking of these things like you're learning to ride a bike and you have the training wheels and you're going to have them on for a while until you feel balanced, until you feel strong enough, until you really feel your center of mass balanced and you can make those adjustments. And the practice toward these type of poses should be looked at as the same way. It's going to take even longer than learning how to ride a bike because it's more challenging in many ways. It's very different. Getting on your hands, many people haven't gotten on their hands for years, maybe even decades. So, and to Kristen's point, I cannot emphasize enough, if you haven't tried lit yoga, you've got to try it because we prepare your body to enable you to do this. And because it's multifaceted. You have to have mobility. You've got to have stability. You've got to have your core stability because that's going to help you unweight all of these, joints because everything's going to be contributing to the workload. So it's not being compressed in the joint. You need to have really good postural alignment so that you can get that full range of shoulder flexion, scapula mobility and scapula stability. And we take you through all that in our developmental beginning, which is called our reset, to better prepare you. And then just stick with it, right? You don't have to rush anything. I'm not against using props like this when you have some kind of wrist issue, but I don't get attached to this idea that you have bad wrist or weak wrist or you always have to use something like that. Very few people actually have to use these things if they had some kind of car accident or surgery, which really limited their range of motion and couldn't otherwise get on their hands without some kind of supplemental thing. But otherwise, really use it sparingly. And if you feel wrist pain, just think, I need more core. I need more scapula stability. I need more shoulder range of motion. And with that, what's happening in your rib cage. So it really is multifaceted. And sometimes when I'm not saying that Christine is doing this or anybody else, but if we stick like a kind of Band-Aid in there, like in the form of a prop thing, it's not addressing all of the different elements that contribute to feeling good on your wrist.
Yeah, those are great short-term ways to allow you to stay practicing, but you need to address the root cause. And a lot cheaper version is just using your fist, using your fingertips, things like that. Those are free. That's what I do whenever mine get aggravated. And I do it on the short term. And, because again, we need to let the body heal, but we really want to, and I know Christine does too. She doesn't want to deal with this. She would much rather treat the root cause. Those are great suggestions.
All right. This next one is from Anonymous. He or she wrote me, what does it mean if a pose is heart opening and what are the benefits?
Well, I can certainly pop in here. What I think of a heart opening pose is I think of that more as actually thoracic extension in my brain. I think traditional yoga thinks of heart opening as adding, I think, quite a bit of shoulder horizontal abduction or abduction, where there's this drawing back, extending the shoulders. Which, do we need that? Probably. A lot of people are really tight in our chest, but where do we need it more and where do we need it? I think, what is a healthier, safer way to get it? is from your upper back. A lot of us spend so much time. Think of where the heart is. The heart it resides within the rib cage. And within the rib cage is attached to the thoracic part of our spine. And if that is closed in, that's going to be closed in at the spine. The spine is rounded around this. Yes, the shoulders come forward too, but that's really as a function of the scapula following the ribs, following the shape that the spine creates. So you don't even have to move your shoulders. If you just get a better posture by drawing think of drawing your sternum forward and opening in the upper back, your shoulders will naturally follow. And that is what I think of as a heart opening. So any pose, and I would argue personally, almost every pose should be in this heart open position. Even my devotional warriors, where we're hinging forward, doesn't matter what my hands are doing. I'm in a heart open. My airplane, warrior 3, some people call that. I'm in an open hearted position. I look around the room and see a lot of people aren't, because why? We go into our postural habits, which is a closed hearted position. We are posturally closed. So I would argue every pose should be open heart. Even plank, people are putting in plank and then protracting those shoulder blades, and they're closing off their heart. Draw the chest through, extend in the upper back, and you're going to feel this broad, it's a lovely feeling, this broadness across your collarbones, this ability to take a better breath. I talk about this a lot in my stretch class about, I would argue that thoracic extension is the number one thing people should do as they get older. Why? Because of the rib cage, because of the lungs. You need to be able to open your chest. You need to be able to get that big breath, because as we age, we're more susceptible to, lung infections. We have a harder time because we lose that pliability in our upper back, in our ribs, in our core, in our whole body, to be fair. But especially think about everybody right now. I don't care what you're doing. Round your back and slouch and try to take a deep breath and see how restricted you feel. Now, come up into a nice triple S, draw your head back in space, extend in the upper back, take a deep breath. And feel that expansion. You can expand in the upper lungs. You can expand in the lower lungs. So, heart opening really boils down to the triple S, and you should be trying to find that pose, that position throughout in every single solitary pose you come into. I'll hop off my soapbox and let you hop onto yours, Laura, because I know you agree.
I totally agree. And I think, I don't know if this was the intention of this question, but we'll hear this a lot. And it used to be like when I started in the yoga world 27 years ago, it was always like heart opening, lead with your heart and all that. And then some people kind of in the science realm are like, wait, that's not really your heart's over to this side. And whatever it is, the idea is metaphorically, when we talk about the chakras, the energetic the channels, this area in around your heart within the rib cage, like KB was talking about, all the way through to between the scapula, is this metaphorical heart center. And there really is something to that where you're standing with this openness in your chest. There is a sense of generosity and compassion and I am here, like also steadiness. So that can be reflected inward as well as outward. And I always say actually to stand in that open-hearted way takes a lot of strength, because a lot of life, our postural life and our experiences in life can really contract us, because that makes us feel somehow either smaller or more secure, but it's not. It's closing us off. It's closing off our breath. It's closing off our energy. It's closing off our generosity, our receptivity, and our giving. So I think, yes, like KB said, we want to aspire for that lift, that openness in the sternum always. Now, what we do see is because people have been rounded, they thrust their shoulders back, like Kristen was saying, and they get a rib thrust forward, and that might feel or appear like it's that heart opening, but that is not biomechanically, that isn't going to work as well. So really you need to have the stability of the rib cage, the thorax, and move the scapula onto the back body to open the sternum and then get that triple S. Where's your head? Because your head is going to influence the shoulders and the rib cage and that sense. So I agree. Anything could be really labeled as a heart opener. We do things like cobra or even like a table, like one-arm table, or certainly people think of wheel. You don't have to go all the way to wheel. If you never do a wheel in your whole life, you're still practicing that. I know when I first was teaching lit, this was, decades ago, people would say, I noticed you don't really do a lot of heart openers. And I was like, oh, but because there was this label of like, they were only in these big back bends, And so this is really to come back to that. I think people are realizing now, no, that you don't have to go into that major extension of the spine to get that feeling of openness here. And especially, how it radiates out from the center of the sternum out to the shoulders and really makes you feel, again, broader, more receptive, more open. And again, to stand in your strength and in your compassion, that's to me being open-hearted.
And I love that you just brought the metaphysical side to it, because I know that when, I'm standing in that triple S posture, I mean, you are giving out that message of receptivity. You're giving out that message of attention. You're giving out that message of strength. And even if you may not be feeling that in the moment, just by going there physically, your brain, I think, at least my brain, my emotions, I feel better. I call it the superhero, heart, that superhero position. You never see a superhero, rounded. They are always just upright and just that heart chakra is shining like a light. And my brain, I'm so science that I think I always go to posture and biomechanics, but it absolutely feeds into your emotion, to your spirit, to your sense.
Think of like when you feel sad or down, you're never like standing tall. You feel crumply, you feel contracted, you feel, they tell people feeling broken emotionally. That's you. When you're standing tall, you will, and people that take our training, we talk about this, but the research shows if you stand tall, you are going to feel different. It changes the neurophysiology. Your testosterone goes up, which is your relating to confidence. Your cortisol goes down, that relates to stress. And of course, you're going to feel more open-hearted when you feel more confident and less stressed. So I think it's like, we always think of like, we're practicing how we want to be in life on the mat, but the practice of yoga is how we infuse that in our life. So practice open-hearted poses all day.
Absolutely. We should all be open-hearted.
Yes, we should. Okay, I've got one more question here. So the recovering Lily asks, what helps to improve proprioception?
Do you want to start by maybe giving a definition of what proprioception is?
Yes.
That was always a foreign word that I got really excited about in PT school to learn about, and it's such a cool concept.
Yeah, so proprioception is our ability to know where we are in space without actually having to kind of intellectualize it, that I know that when I move my arm, that I am reaching for something, I sense where it's going before. There's no like, obviously it is an executive function, but it's happening because I have all these receptors that are telling me where I am in space. We get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It's dark. I'm not going to, if I trust my feet and the proprioception that it's giving me, I'm walking. I can feel like when I step on a towel that's been left on the ground or something. And that just allows me to make adjustments in my body accordingly. We often talk in PT about proprioception being so important because it keeps you safe, right? The proprioceptors are there along with the Golgi tendons to keep you safe with movement. One is helping you know where you are in space, and the other is really helping you know where your end range is or when you're getting into the end range of motion, it's signals to the brain to create some tension, so that it's protecting. So we have these amazing receptors that help us. And proprioceptors can get injured or damaged, just like other, soft tissue structures. So if I sprain my ankle, I'm not just spraining and overstretching the ligaments and creating inflammation and pain and swelling and all that. I've also impacted the proprioceptors that are around there. So that's why people who have sprained an ankle are more likely to sprain it again unless they retrain the proprioceptors. So what we want with proprioception is sensorial stimulation so that we can be aware that, of this area. Because if you've ever, say, gotten, surgery or something and there's a scar, or you've overstretched a ligament, like we were talking about a few episodes ago with the jaw, and then the nerve becomes numb. So the nerves might be affected, but the receptors also might be. So you literally are not as clear where your footing is. So sensorial stimulation, we need to stimulate so the proprioceptors have some input. So you give input for a better proprioception. And then you also give demand for more proprioception. So for instance, if it was the ankle sprain again, I would start working once the injury has, I've gotten to a point where it's not so painful or swollen. I'd start doing things where I put the demand on that on the ankle to respond. So one-legged things, and then really just feeling. Because again, you're not going to feel. You might need a mirror in front of you. You might need to be looking down at it. You might need more tactile cues and more visual cues because, again, the proprioceptors are what we call delayed in firing. So that's what happens. You start to turn your ankle, but your brain's totally unaware of it because the message is like super slow. And then by the time you figured it out, you've already re-sprained it. So there's sensorial, there's demand that you can put on it. Every time you're weight bearing through an area. So that's why we spend so much time weight bearing in yoga. And it's not just, obviously, we're always weight bearing. We're not floating in space, but weight bearing on our hands, weight bearing on our feet, weight bearing on our knees, weight bearing on our forearms. All these are different ways of stimulating the different proprioceptors that are numerous in the body, and to stimulate them to be more effective where we are in space. So the proprioceptors are going to help us as we move in a coordinated way. They're going to respond quicker to changes. So again, if I start moving around the mat, side lunge, and I pivot, if my proprioceptors are like delayed, that pivoting could be kind of wonky on the joints. It could be wonky on my ankle, my knee, my hip, my low back. So everywhere there are proprioceptors, and by more weight bearing, because you're getting this ground reaction force through the body, which is stimulating all the bone, the soft tissue around it, and then all these different receptors as well. So doing that, and that could be a form of sensorial stimulation.
Well, I think the beauty of proprioception is it can be trained. And this just, as you were talking, it brought me to, we have some ads out occasionally about LIT, and it'll be maybe a video, Laura, of you moving on the mat. And it is not just once, it's several times I've seen comments that people will make. We've got those trolls out there like, well, what about for those of us who are uncoordinated? This is not for us. And I'm actually saddened by that someone has literally pigeonholed themselves to say, I cannot move in that way because I'm too uncoordinated. That's proprioception. And we have people coming to us as we age, we lose proprioception. Like you said, after injury, we lose proprioception. And there's an ego attached to that. When you ask someone to stand, they come to see me for whatever, stand on one leg for 10 seconds, and they can't do it. They are shocked. They're humbled. There's this feeling of failure. And my job is to say, guess what? Our body is so amazing that we can train this. We're going to get that back. Trust me. You're going to look back on this and be amazed you couldn't do it. But it needs training. Proprioception needs training. And unfortunately, a lot of what we do in life, we're moving in a very uniplanar manner, and it's usually sagittal plane, front to back. We're not moving often enough in this multiplanar movement. And so it's our proprioceptors that allow us to do that well. But good news, proprioceptors can be trained. And it is amazing to watch and beautiful to watch people who really, they do feel uncoordinated as heck. And they look like baby deer out on the mat. And they're confused. But by golly, if they stick with it, their brain-body connection, this proprioception, grows and becomes fluid. And as a result, to your point, Laura, that's what allows you to, when you aren't thinking about it, have reactivity, be able to adjust on the fly to something unexpected that happens. You become more, I even hate the term coordinated, because it's not
Adaptable.
it's adaptable.
Like, yeah, we've had people write us, I slipped in the shower and before lit, I would have probably broken my hip or cracked my head, but I responded. Or I was hiking and I twisted my knee, but it didn't even bother me because there was a quicker response. And that's adaptability, which is part of the coordination and all that. And I agree with you. It's so sad when people do say that. And I want to respond like, I feel like I'm training for life, right? It's not done. Like even if I'm more coordinated now, I'm always trying to challenge myself. So wherever you are, if you are in that place where it's like, I could never get up off the ground, turn around and all that, then start smaller, but don't limit yourself, because again, your brain will grow. And with all of that, all of the influences that the brain has, including on these receptors, will improve. But it's not going to by just saying, oh, well,
I can't do it.
She has that and I don't. No, we all have this ability. It's just you have to train it. And it's a training for life.
It is. It is. It is truly moving better for life. And that is what proprioception is all about. You can lift as many weights as you want. You can get on the bike and ride as many miles as you want and be stronger, maybe, stronger in your muscles, stronger in your cardiovascular. But for movement purposes, for balance, you really do need to tap into those proprioceptors and, really just enjoy the ride of watching them improve. It's fun as a PT, all the stuff that we try. I'll do something, I'll be like, wow, I really did that well. And then I'm like, well, duh, because I'm showing people day in and day out how to do stuff. I'm growing too. So, think of it as a fun little science experiment and be okay to fall. That again, that's all how we learn. I mean, even you've got those little proprioceptors, those little, in your skin, and just moving your arm, that feeling of the air is a proprioception. It's that input Laura's talking about. We have all these different inputs, but we need to keep inputting information to them or they will get stale and stagnant.
Dull. Yeah, exactly. All right. So everybody keep moving, get lit. That's what all of this stuff we work on. So, check out our Lit Daily. We have almost 1,000 classes, not all up there at one time, but you can start small and just keep with it. It will change your life, I promise you. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please write me or KB on Instagram, laura.hyman or kbwilliams99.
Yep. You can also reach us via email at support@lityoga.com. That's LYT yoga.com. We will have those forwarded to us and get back to you real quick.
Yeah, we love your questions and we love you. And as always, we're pulling for you.